Well, for more, let's cross to Brussels and Claude Moniquet, president of the European Strategic Intelligence and Security Center. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
It's a pleasure.
A head of French military intelligence out of his job after just 7 months. What more do we know?
What we know is that it seems that President Macron and the surrounding of President Macron accused General Vidot of not having managed to gather the good information, the good intelligence before the war, saying that Vladimir Putin was really wanted to invade Ukraine. And at the same time, of course, as everyone remember, the British and the US intelligence had this exact intelligence. They were almost saying at what time the war will begin. But we have a small technical point to do, if you allow me. Actually, the General Vidot was the chief of the DRM, the Military Intelligence Directorate. And the job of the DRM is to gather the intelligence about pure tactical and military affairs, order of battles, the force of the belligerent, and so on. The intentionality, the political question is much more the job of the DGSC, the external intelligence, because it's a strategic intelligence. So it's a bit unfair maybe to reproach to General Vidot for not having provided the job of another service.
So the DGSC is sort of the French equivalent of MI6 or the CIA.
Absolutely, yes. The DGSC is in charge of the strategic intelligence, political intelligence, the intentions of the belligerent and of the potential enemies, and the DRM is mainly targeting the purely tactical and military aspects.
Okay, so if it was unfair, again, why was he forced out?
It's a long story because it's not only the story of the problem of Ukraine, but 2 years ago, and it's not only also the DRM, but also the DGSC, and maybe we will see some change in the DGSC in the coming weeks or months. But 2 years ago, for instance, the French intelligence was unable to predict the coup d'etat, the putsch in Mali. They were also unable to predict the fact that the Russian Wagner group was about to deploy in Mali, as they did in the last months, with terrible consequence, the retrieval of the French and European forces from Mali, for instance. So it's an accumulation of mistakes and that.
But hang on, Claude Moniquet, turn back the clock just a few months. The French pulled their people out of Afghanistan and said, watch out, the Taliban are about to overrun. The Americans said, oh, that's not true. The French got it right in Afghanistan. Why did they get it right in Afghanistan and get it wrong in Ukraine?
I think it's a completely different story. First of all, the French were on the ground in Afghanistan, like the British and the US, of course. They were on the ground for years. So they had a lot of people, of assets, intelligence assets, of network working there. They had also very close contact with a part of the anti-Taliban opposition, the people of Massoud, who were very close to the French intelligence. So they had really a deep knowledge of what was the feeling of the Afghan people and how the situation was evolving on the ground. It was clearly not the case in Ukraine.
Clearly not the case in Ukraine. So there's a big sweep going on, and it sounds from reading what the news wires are saying that the French are in admiration of the Western strategy, and we heard it in that report of going public with whatever information they have. We're not sitting on it, and that, to a certain degree, they say should have been more the French strategy as well. Your thoughts on that?
I'm not sure it's really the main point. If on the precise case of Ukraine, if we want to make a comparison between the French intelligence and the Anglo-Saxon intelligence, the British and the US intelligence, why the British and the US were so good on Ukraine. It's for basically for two reasons. The first reason clearly is that the British, because all this intelligence came firstly from the British. The British have a long story, about 1 century, of doing intelligence in Russia. They have excellent sources, and they have clearly sources very near the Kremlin and probably very near Vladimir Putin. The second point is that there is a technical and a mass effect. The US, the British, the Canadian, the New Zealanders, the Australian work together. It's the Five Eyes, the UKUSA agreement. So they mutualize the intelligence they have, and of course it gives them a very important, predominance on the prominence.
Are you suggesting that France should join that Five Eyes alliance?
I'm afraid it's impossible, because clearly the Five Eyes alliance, the UKUSA Pact, is clearly tailored by the Anglo-Saxons for the Anglo-Saxons. So I don't see any people from the French-speaking world joining them. It's quite. Maybe it's it's sad, but it's clearly not possible.
Claude Moniquet, help out the viewers here. Help us out here. When we wake up in the morning and we hear the State Department or the White House briefing saying, "Oh, there's trouble at the Kremlin," like we saw in that report, and the British saying the same thing, how do we know when it's just the fog of war, or how do we know when they actually have firm intelligence?
I think it's both. First of all, don't forget that to spread the fog of war is also the job of the intelligence. It's a business of the intelligence service. So, of course, if you want to have an influence on your enemy, on your adversary, you have to spread a lot of things. Some of them are true, and the adversary will say, "Oh, Jesus, how can they know that?" And some of them are wrong, but maybe they will search something, and they will try to see if you have not another source of intelligence. So it's a part of fog of war, clearly.
So when Washington says there's dissent at the Kremlin, the generals and the intelligence advisors are misleading Vladimir Putin or too scared to tell him the truth, do you believe the Americans?
I believe that partly yes, because we have hard facts. We have a kind of smoking gun there. For instance, we have the General Sergei Beseda, the chief of the 5th Directorate of the FSB, who was in charge of the intelligence in Ukraine prior to the invasion. And this man was sacked 2 weeks after the beginning of the war. And apparently is in house arrest as his deputy is. For both corruption, it seems that they took the money that to spend in Ukraine, and also because they mislead. They provided false information to Vladimir Putin and to the top of the Kremlin and the Russian regime, and they conduct them to think that the Ukrainian war will be extremely easy and will be over in a few days. And we see 4 weeks or 5 weeks after that it was completely false. So yes, there is clearly there is a part of fog of war, but there is clearly also a deep problem between the Kremlin in one hand and in the other hand intelligence and the army.
And 5 weeks in, who's better at fog of war? I ask the question because, every day the Russians say one thing and the opposite the next.
Absolutely, but the master of fog of war are clearly the Russians, and since decades, they are the special directorate in the KGB in the past on disinformation and on what they called active measures, which is fog of war, spreading fog of war, manipulating people, newspapers, and so on, and playing with information. They are really masters in this game, but the British are clearly not too bad.
Claude Moniquet, many thanks for joining us from Brussels.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.